morning from my side. My name is Daniel Rasch. I'm a MAXQDA teacher since 2012, I think. So I managed to work myself through several versions now. With the latest version, 2018, which we also worked with here in the Visual Tools seminar or breakout session. And I would like to highlight some features, and obviously not all of them because you only have 20 minutes and then a short discussion about these tools. So I will talk about those tools which I think have the biggest strength in terms of analytical power, which are the Code Matrix browser and the Code Relations browser. I think there was a spotlight sessions already on the concept maps and on maps, so I won't touch that item. Although I think that maps also is a very structural and powerful tool in relation to the analysis. And I will talk just shortly about the others, the document comparison chart, document portrait, the code line, and the work cloud, because they are there and they might help you in your special occasion to focus your analysis on certain aspects. Visual tools in MAXQDA help us more or less in three different ways. First, obviously, they help us for, in the sense of our analysis, so deepen our analysis of the data that we have, of our observations, trying to identify different patterns. They also help, obviously, to visualize different effects or visualize the distribution of codes inside documents, document groups, document sets. And the third point is that we can use these tools to prepare our data in order to use it in publications and journal articles, whatever. So I think those three tools are very, very powerful. I have a political science background, and we have a lot of, well, we have a trend now that goes more into the quantitative things. So a lot of studies are more and more quantitative oriented. So what we do is more or less having qualitative data and transforming that into quantitative things in order to be able to run regressions and have more generalizable and more reliable data. And that's a trend that is, I think it started 10 years ago or something. So it's very visible, and I think those tools that are in MAXQDA help us in that way to as I said, analyze the data and also quantify the data in order to be able to perform mixed methods and perform statistical analysis. However, let's start with the first one, with the Code Matrix browser, because I think that's the strongest tool in MAXQDA, which gives you a matrix, as the name already tells you, a matrix about the documents and the codes, and you can tell which code has been assigned to which document, and even how often it has been assigned in that document. So you can actually see if there are patterns in the sense that if a document has certain codes and compare it across the different documents or different document groups. I will use the example data set that you all have on your computer, because it comes along with the installation of MAXQDA itself. So if you would like to rerun the tasks which are on the handout, you can do that easily by just opening the example file, which is automatically installed when you use MAXQDA. So before you can use is it sharp, by the way? Can you read it from behind? Yeah, okay. Before you can start this matrix, you have to select what MAXQDA should put in the columns, which means the rows in a matrix are already selected because it's already the codes. And then you can select the columns and say, okay, I would like to look at in the individual observations, the individual documents. I would like to look at document groups, or if you have them, document sets, right? Or even better now, you can look at focus groups, right? And so you can compare easily the different participants or the different documents that you observe in the different columns. If you have a very big code system, very long one, and you would like to select certain codes and would like to look only at some of these codes in the Code Matrix browser, you could obviously activate it before and then select the icon here, so to look only at activated documents or activated codes. It works in both ways. And you can also use a weight filter if you apply these weight filters for each coded segment. And here you can click or select if you would like to kind of dichotomize the values, so 0 or 1s only, so not the frequencies. However, you can leave that unselected because later on in the code matrix browser you can switch between the frequencies and the dichotomized version very easily. So I think that's it's unnecessary here to have the button, but it's here, so we have to work with it. Here you have this help button, obviously, you know that already, which brings you to the manual and to the directly to the chapter directly about the code matrix browser, and it looks like have an internet connection. Should be right. So it looks like that, right? There's a video and all these things that you already know about the online manual, so you can read what you can do with that tool. And if you now, for example, click on OK, you get this interesting matrix, which should like this in your case. If you do not select anything before, so it might be pretty small from behind. But what you can see here is in the columns you have the individual documents, so the interviews with George, Joanna, John, Kim, whatever, and you have the codes and the code system in the rows. And each time you see a dot or a not, let's call it that way, the code has been assigned. So here you can easily check your whole document system and your whole documents, for example, for saturation, right? This is an important factor in qualitative content analysis. For example, is my code system saturated? So do I use every code in every document? If not, why is that the case, right? Measurement errors of different orders. Do I not observe it because it's not there? Do I miss it, right? Do I have to recheck the documents? So this is a very interesting tool for also checking the saturation and the completion of my document system. Another tool obviously is you can check for patterns, right? You can see if some codes have been used more often in some documents than anywhere else. In that case, you see that this not here with the interview of Kim and friends is slightly bigger than the others. And if I click on the numbers, which is here, it's an icon that says 1, 2, 3. You can see the reason for that. So the size of this bubble or not is related to the frequency, how often the code has been assigned in that single document, right? So you see here, this one says 45. So 45 codes in this document in the focus group refer to this transcript item. However, coming back to that friends and Kim thing, we see that Kim talked about in her interview about friends 17 times, which means the others already talked about that 6 times, 2 times, maybe 4 times, but she used the friend thing very much in her interview. So the question is, why is that, right? Here you can, as I said, easily identify several patterns to see whether there are some of these or not. If you now, for example, double-click on the numbers, the 17, for example, what MAXQDA does, it gives you the qualitative data in the fourth window that lies behind these. I just go make the window a bit smaller. You can see it here, right? So these are the 17, as you can see. It activates automatically the code that you've clicked on and the document that you've clicked on, and you see in the Retrieve Segments window all these 17 coded segments that lie behind these, right? So this is a very interesting tool that you can switch between the quantitative aspects, look into that data and says, why is that a high number, right? Everywhere else I have 8, 6, 7, 4, why 17? So this is very strange thing, and you can observe it by easily clicking on that number. Another thing in that very powerful tool, as I said, is the export functions. So if you would like, in terms of quantifying your qualitative data, that's the way to go, right? So you have the frequencies on one table for all the documents and all the codes, and you see these 313 coded segments are here separated for each of the documents and for each of the codes. So it's easily transferable to an Excel file, and then you're easily going to a statistical package like RSdata, SPSS, whatever you use, right? Just be prepared. There are several, let's call it odds that come along when using count data for regression analysis. There's a whole literature about that, mostly from biology, I think, because when they are counting animals, right, how many times they observe a crocodile, whatever, or a bird, they also have these measurement errors. So why do I not observe a bird? Is it not there? Has it died? Why is it not there? So there's a whole literature about the things that you might want to look at when using frequencies and count data in quantitative analysis later on. The bottom that I highlighted here is these bottom for dichotomizing the data. So now we have the frequencies, right, 313. And if you now click on that button, it only tells us if the code has been assigned or not. So 0 or 1. And if you now export this to Excel, MAXQDA would fill the empty cells with a 0, right? And then you can easily perform the logistic regressions where you have to. There are not that many things to take into account using logistic regressions when using count data. So it's a bit easier, although the obviously the results are a little bit constrained or limited. Let's say it in that words. Or if you would like to, as I said, use the visualizations of that tool, you just declick the frequencies, go again in the not section, then you have the screenshot option, so you can capture the monitor that you see and put it in a presentation or as a file somewhere in the report, so that you can have the file ready at any point. Right. So this is, I think, one of the most interesting tools in MAXQDA. Let me switch to the code relations browser. It also gives you a matrix. However, the matrix in that sense is the relation between the codes, right? So you can deselect and select documents before where MAXQDA should search for these relations. However, it only gives you a matrix about the relations between the codes to each other, right? So if they intersect or if they are close to each other. One example of that intersection means, for example, here, whenever a code has been assigned in the same unit of analysis or coding unit, let's put it that way, the coding unit, it would be an intersection and it would be a relationship between parents and career, right? So that would be a relationship. However, the document is structured, so in terms of a structured interview or in terms of a newspaper analysis or whatever, there are certain paragraphs or certain aspects that you expect to follow each other. So they are not overlapping in the coding unit, but you think, okay, I'm talking here about career, I'm talking about health, and I would like to see the relationship. So I cannot look at the intersection, the overlapping between those, between different paragraphs, but I can look at the closeness between the codes and analyze the closeness between those things and see what codes have been used in the close relationship or nearness with the other codes. And this is what the code relation browser does. It can either look for the intersections or for the closeness of codes with each other. Before it starts, again, you have this pre-selection window, so you can select the rows and the columns. Would you like to look only at, would you like to look at all codes or activated codes, or select in the columns the top-level code, so the main code only. And then you have to select the type of analysis, the co-occurrence, which means the intersection, or the nearness of codes or closeness of codes, which means looking at paragraphs and these different things. Count hits per document only once. Again, you can dichotomize the data and look if the code has been found or not. I am going to deselect those things and just look at the overall data set at once. And then encapsulate again a matrix that looks very similar to the one that we had before. So now we have kind of the same thing in the columns as we have in the rows. So we have the different codes in the columns and we have the codes in the rows. And whenever there is a relationship, I think I can investigate the big knots and see whether there is a real pattern or not. For example, let's look in this friends thing here, and I see it seems that there is a big relationship, for example, between parents and home life, and between friends and relationships, which is very interesting, right? Why should friends be mentioned together with relationships, and why would they overlap? So it would be interesting to look into those passages a bit more detailed and look what are these intersections, right? So now it's again with the code matrix browser. You just double click in that node and activate MAXQDA activates those two codes with the respective documents lying behind these, and you can see all 21. If I click on the numbers, it's again the same menu that we had before. 1, 2, 3 again gives us the numbers. Okay, so all 21 coded segments I will see in the fourth window, as we did before with the code matrix browser, retrieve segments window, all 21 coded segments. So I have a very good overview about those intersections between friends and relationships, right, in the documents which are important and which have these coded segments.
Could you just repeat how did you show the numbers here, like in this case 21?
Mm-hmm.
Was it just a click?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Just a click. So you can here in these three icons, you can either display these numbers as knots, and the one thing it's how's it called, as squares, right? Okay. Then if you don't like squares, you can also have circles. Just an option, right? Okay. Or the numbers, though it's an option, the icon 1, 2, 3, and then you can set it. No problem, right? So that's also very helpful tool. And then you have these two options, which switch between the analysis of the intersections, which we're looking at now. So the how's it called here? The co-occurrence. So each paragraph has to be coded with both codes. Or, as I said before, the analysis could be also referring to the closeness of each code. So how close are the codes to each other? And if I click on this button, I have to select the distance between the codes I would like to look at. So, for example, I expect two codes to be very close to each other, let's say in 1 or 2 paragraphs from each other. So, for example, a question about health and health satisfaction might be in relation to parents or to siblings. And the one question would be, or the one paragraph would be 5 and the other one would be 6. So I would put here a 1 in order to investigate if there are these relationships between those two paragraphs, between 5 and 6 or 5 and 4. With that. If I would like to look at 4 and 7, I will have to put that to a distance of 3. Right? So you can investigate and play a little bit along with these distances of what you expect the codes would be as close to each other. In texts, it looks at paragraphs. In tables, it looks at rows. And in media files, it looks at seconds. Right? So you can also do that for audio files or video files to see whether the codes are close to each other, and then say, okay, within 20 seconds or within 10 seconds, I expect the interviewee to talk about his health satisfaction and parents, or whatever, right? And that would be done in that way. So if I just click on one paragraph here, so I would like to see if there's a relationship between those. You can see that the relationship between what have we, friends and relationships, it's still close, but it's even more, right? We had before 31, and now we have wrong button. And now we have 31, so 10 coded segments more than the 21 before, where we have passages where the codes have been used together. So we know that there might really be a close relationship between those friends and the relationship aspect. Okay, again, you have the export functions with the screenshot of the Excel file, and yeah, you can also dichotomize the data again, so they have the same icons that we had before, right? So binarize the view, look at the 0 and 1s. Okay, just shortly, the other three tools need different code colors. So these visual tools work with code colors, and it is important that you assign the code colors to the different codes in order to be able to use those three document comparison chart, the document portrait, and the code line. And in order to be, I mean, you can use it in that way, but if every code is blue, there is no, you cannot differentiate between the different codes, right? So if you, for example, assign different codes to the people, that's on the last page of the document. So for example, let's say parents are green. You know that process, right? Right mouse click on the code, and then you can easily assign one of the pre-selected colors. Siblings is red. Friends is violet. And partner would be orange. Yes, so it just changed the colors for the codes. And if we, for example, now look only at the interviews, what did I say? New York and Indiana. So leave the pictures and focus groups, whatever, we'll leave that out. And then we click on the document comparison chart. Only for activate documents, yes. This is what we get. We now have the documents in the rows, right? So we have the interviews with George, Joanna, John, Kim, Mary, whatever, and the paragraphs of the interviews and the codes that has been assigned or used in these different paragraphs. So I see, as we said, parents are green, so they see a lot of parents here. We see also a lot of red was siblings, right? In the beginning of the questionnaire, we know also that they do not play much of a role at the end. At the end, it's more about grandparents, right? So this is a very interesting pattern, and it seems to be more or less equally against for all of the documents. Bless you. However, in paragraph 15, we know that, who's that? Teresa is talking about the parents, right? Whereas all the others are talking about the grandparents. Might be a paragraph to look at. Now the big question is, all the interviews might be of different length, right? So you might have an interview having 27 paragraphs, an interview that only has 17 paragraphs, whatever. So there's now a new inbuilt function that simulates that the document length is the same, so that this visual tool can also help to interpret the data. Which means MAXQDA doesn't look at the paragraphs as such, but it says all paragraphs are 100%. And let's look how much space each of the different coded segments are taken by the different codes. So this is a way how you can standardize the document length and look at the different length. It was already clicked, so now here we have the normal length of the different. Sorry, no, it was deselected. Now we have the 100%, as you see that, right? So it now goes until 100, and you can see now how the codes are distributed across the documents in the different paragraphs or in the different percentages of the text, right? This is, I think, a very interesting tool. Also the export functions again, screenshot, Excel file, whatever you would like to do with that tool. The others, just shortly, document portrait gives you a document portrait of the document colors for just one document. In that sense, here it is Mary, because Mary was opened in the document browser window. So this is how the codes are distributed in one document, and you can do that, for example, now for all of the different documents, compare them and how the codes are distributed around that. So this is a nice tool to play around and to have at least some overview of the distribution of codes and use it as an analytic tool to detect and identify patterns and observe, as I said, the distribution of the different codes in your data set.